Welcome to Ghostlight, a podcast about the intersection of business and the performing arts. Each week, I sit down with industry professionals to talk about the nuts and bolts of thriving and surviving in the arts industry. Welcome today, Jim Warren, artistic director and builder of companies. Glad to have you, Jim.
I am impressed with your good consonant work to get my name because Mr. Moore, people have a hard time hearing the M and the W because people have a hard time saying
Gotcha.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, understandable. Well,
So very, very lovely diction. So
thank you. It's what I'm most known for, I think. Uh,
good.
Jim, well,
Benjamin Diction Reed.
yes. Um, I mean, you've spent decades not just making theater, but building institutions. So for listeners who don't know your story, how do you describe what you actually do? What's your work?
Um, wow. I think what I do is an outgrowth of what I've done.
Mm-hmm.
That I didn't set out to be a theater maker. I didn't set out to be a builder of institutions. Um, I worked with a Shakespeare professor while I was an undergraduate student, and we did this thing where we studied Shakespeare staging conditions in a classroom, and then performed a play based on what all of the research that we did on how Shakespeare's company might have staged their plays. And that was such a positive experience that I said we should start a professional company using Shakespeare staging conditions. And there was, even though that sentence is we should start a professional company, it was all born out of, isn't Shakespeare so great when you do his plays under these conditions? Uh, and so the idea was simply, I want to show people how great Shakespeare is. It wasn't, I want to build a business. Um, but having that idea of Shakespeare's plays are friggin' awesome when you perform them under his staging conditions, that became a snowball that just became bigger and bigger as we tried to sell it to more and more people. So that started with this idea and a production with a $500 budget uh, and 14 performances of an English history play, Richard III, in rural Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
So there was obviously no smart thinking about, what would be a good idea for a business? Let's do this. But it just kept getting more and more successful. And the more I tried to sell it, the further and further away from Virginia we got. That we started in 1988, and then by the mid 90s, we'd been to 47 US states and 5 other countries because the idea behind Shakespeare staging conditions was so relevant to so many different kinds of people. It just connected. It worked. It worked for entertainment. Kids that were forced to read and watch Shakespeare loved it. Scholars were blown away by how faithful we were to Shakespeare's text and by using his performance conditions. So we created this cross section of customers, of people who were entertained by this, that it just became the okay, if we can go further, then I need to hire actors longer. If we do more performances where where venues are paying for us, then I can pay actors a full-time salary. And it just became, building the business became, I think we've found a niche. We found something that is popular. How can we get to people who have money that will buy us and sell tickets on their own? How do we parlay that into something bigger and better? And that became 30 years of building that company. That we were so successful as a touring entity that folks came to us to ask us to build a theater. and we considered a whole bunch of things, and we ended up building the Blackfriars Playhouse, which is Shakespeare's indoor theater. We built that in the Shenandoah Valley of Stanton, Virginia. And so that by the end of my 30 years with my company, let's see, we built that in 2001 is when we opened, and I left at the end of 2017. So we had succeeded beyond my wildest dreams at taking that idea. Isn't Shakespeare cool when you perform it like this? And exploding that idea to other plays, other playwrights, new plays, uh, and so you can say that I am a builder of institutions, where it was really this tiny idea that then snowballed, and a lot of on the job training, a lot of decisions that I made that were great, and others that sucked, and hopefully the and I think that's true with any business. You're gonna make those calls, and hopefully the decisions you make that suck don't bury you. And unfortunately, that's what's happened to a lot of theaters, is they try to grow
Yeah.
too fast, they try to do things that they're not ready for, and they make those decisions that end up killing them. And so I was, knock on everything, my mistakes didn't kill us.
Were there moments where the American Shakespeare Center almost didn't make it? I mean, were there any
Yeah.
kind of pivotal moments where it was like, I don't know if we're going to get to the other side?
Uh, we made the call in the 90s to go to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival in Scotland,
Hmm.
uh, because it's the greatest theater festival in the world, in my opinion, and has companies that are tiny and companies that are huge. It was a great idea. What we didn't do great is uh, do special fundraising to pay for it, because even if you're successful on the Fringe in terms of performances, selling tickets, there's no way you're going to cover your costs. And uh, like so many things in building it started as the Shenandoah Shakespeare Express and then became the American Shakespeare Center. So many times during the those years, it was my naivete that pushed us into things that allowed us to grow. But this was a case where we lost our shirts. And here's the thing. We lost our shirts, but we survived it. I did it again. I did it twice, thinking I had learned this, that, and the other. We lost our shirts again. But part of what we also got was reviews that helped us
Mm,
sell our shows even better, to the colleges and performing arts centers in the States. You throw up international reviews, and that's a great thing to have. Um,
yeah.
so so those were two places. There was also a big moment close to the same time where we had been hiring student actors and touring in the summer and touring on their breaks, um, but not paying a full time wage, uh, because we weren't making enough money, and we were dealing with actors that didn't have full time availability. The first choice to say, okay, I think I can sell us enough in the fall that people who have graduated or people that want to take a leave, I can pay a full time wage if I can sell us full time. That it was the chicken and egg thing of, I can make more money if we're available, but we have to be available for us to make that money. Uh,
Hmm.
and and I guessed wrong about how much I could pay people. So I contracted people for X amount, and we paid X amount. We didn't quite make enough money to cover that, but again, that mistake didn't kill us. So,
Right.
and there was a way I was able to take that success and adjust it a little bit, and so that was a fall season. That was our first time paying people full time. That went into the summer, And then from there on, it became year-round contracts because I knew I could do it. I just needed to do it better. Um,
Hmm.
did that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. It led me to wonder, were those moments where, a big risk was taken and it didn't necessarily work out in the moment, but turned out to be a positive in the long run? Are those moments necessary in order for that kind of growth to be experienced? Like if you don't take those swings, will it not get there?
It's a great question, and I think the answer is tricky because I don't think the answer is clear cut. Let me give you another example. We didn't build the Blackfriars Playhouse the right way. That that
How so?
that we hired a firm to do a fundraising feasibility study,
Hmm.
and they came back saying uh, the circle that you have there. But here's the thing for people who may not know this: fundraising people do not go out and make you new money. They do not go out and find funders for you. They simply corral the people who are already in your orbit.
Hmm.
That you're giving them all of the leads. They don't generate leads on their own. So their assessment was this 3.7, 3.9, this 3 point whatever $1 million building. You're only going to be able to raise 1 point something to 2 million of it. That you're not going to be able to raise the whole thing. And we said, well, maybe we can do better than what you are suggesting. So we're going to go forward with it. And so what I know now is theaters don't usually get built until you raised X, 70 to 80% of the money before you even announce that you are fundraising for this
Oh,
building. So that normally theaters are only having to raise the final 10 to 20% of their goal once it becomes known to the public.
because you've secured the major donors that are going to get you, and so now it's about casting a wide net to finish the fundraising
Correct.
job. Is that okay?
Correct. And doing all of that without it being public has been key to the success of what most people do. We threw all we ignored all of that. And we announced it and we're raising money and we got enough for the construction loan and we built the place and we ended up raising more money than that fundraising firm told us we could, but still not enough. And we opened the building and we're basically carrying a mortgage. That's another
Hmm.
place where it could have sunk us because the way the terms were with the bank, we had to do a lot of jumping through hoops just to get a mortgage that had a monthly payment that we could make. I mean, it sounds kind of normal. Well, of course you don't, when you buy a house, you don't give them all the money up front. But
Yeah,
with theaters, you usually do
really.
because the idea of carrying a mortgage was not common in building theaters.
Right.
And so it didn't kill us, but we had to get guarantors on that loan. And I believe so that was 2000, 2001 where we secured that loan. I believe that the American Shakespeare Center today is still paying on that loan.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, I believe so
so
from the reports.
and again, if we hadn't done the wrong thing, there'd be no Blackfriars. So was that necessary? Kinda,
Yeah.
but it also created a precarious situation that that, by the time we got to the economic downturn of 2008, we were screwed in a lot of ways, and we
Yeah.
managed to survive. I was gone before the pandemic, but of course the pandemic changed everything for every theater. But even more so if you're still paying a mortgage on a building. It, th- so back to your question, strategically taking big swings to get the big payoff, big risk, big payoff, big risk. If you don't take, if you don't get the payoff, if it doesn't work, does it kill you? Those are really difficult situations. And in my case, for the 30 years, we survived those difficult things, but I'm not sure I can say, hey, all of you kids out there that are going to build a theater, this ended up working for me. Maybe it'll work for you. I'm not sure that's the right advice. And
Yeah. I mean,
since I left that place, I've been a consultant, and I would never consult for somebody to say, you know what a good idea is? Do what I did. I think one of the reasons
right.
I'm a good consultant is that I can say, hey, I did this and that was bad. Don't do that.
Mm.
Figure out a way to do it better.
Well, so once you're in that situation, how do you balance the clarity of your mission with the compromises you have to make in order to keep the doors open?
I could phrase this a bunch of different ways. I'm going to phrase it in the bold way that my brain went to it first. If you don't have a mission that makes money, you're screwed. If your mission, if the reason you exist does not include making the money it takes to accomplish that mission, I think you're in the wrong business. And this is the tip of the iceberg of where I think modern American, I'm going to say American, even though I think it applies internationally, but modern American theater is built on a foundation that needs to change. That I believe that being a nonprofit company in the United States, which means you're a 501c3 tax exempt organization, you don't have to pay property tax, you don't have to pay certain taxes, and people can donate to you and write it off on their taxes. I do not believe that that means your business should run where your expenses are higher than your income and you make up that difference with donors.
Mm-hmm.
That has been our system, and I think that it is flawed at its core, and it's caused theaters to run themselves badly because they can just try to get a grant to make that up. They can get donors to make up their deficits. And actually, they're planning. I planned X percentage of my budget is coming from uh, contributed income, whether or not that's through grants or through donors. If that is your business model, and you have an economic downturn, you have, I mean, the pandemic is that's an extreme situation because it shut everything down. But in coming back from, we're no longer in a pandemic, but people are giving far less to nonprofits.
Mm-hmm.
So if your budget is set up that you have to make X number, X percentage through these donations, good luck in this environment.
Mm-hmm.
So that is getting back to a lot of theaters, I would say most theaters, the vast majority of theaters in their mission statements don't mean much. They are really vague and basically are about we're going to do theater that matters. We're going to do
Mm-hmm.
theater that creates conversation. We're going to do, it's gray enough that you can do whatever it is you want and still be true to mission. My company was different in that our mission was about Shakespeare staging conditions. And
Mm-hmm.
so whether or not that's Shakespeare's plays, contemporaries of Shakespeare, modern plays done with those staging conditions, new plays being written for those staging conditions, it gave us a whole lot of potential product that was still within the mission, but the mission was, we're not like every other modern theater that's trying to do movies on stage. We're leaving the lights on, we're putting the audience on three sides of the playing area, we're getting actors and directors to cast that audience into every scene of every play, creating an interactive dynamic, only live, unplugged music and sound effects. All of these things made us, in my opinion, different than most theaters, but also more exciting and more higher entertainment value. Uh, and to me, staying inside of that mission was always our way to find more money. That that
Hmm.
that I never. How should I put this? I had other people all the time telling me we should go outside of our mission. That we couldn't survive unless we started doing things differently. I disagreed with them, and 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 by the time I left after 30 years, we were in the black. We'd been in the black for several years, and because we were pursuing something that was not only off the beaten path, but it wasn't weird for the sake of being weird. It was different in a way that I think was more effective. And
Hmm.
so I think any effort to go away from that mission to be more like other theaters was a bad call, mission wise and money wise.
Yeah.
So, so I think part of the heart of how you brought up that question is have a mission that matters so much and is a platform to money. You know, that if your mission doesn't include making money to accomplish that mission, I don't know why you think you're going to be successful.
Well, in a conversation with Jesse Lillis of Starling Shakespeare, who we're going to see in Canada in a week.
I love Jesse.
um,
I think Jesse's awesome. I don't know her super
yeah,
well, but every little bit that I know, I think she's great.
she's super smart. And it was a great conversation. We brought up um, a distinction that I think we should lean into as we move forward in the performing arts industry, which is the difference between a nonprofit and a not-for-profit, and or a charity, right? So if part of your mission is to provide a free service, and that means there is no operating income, um, then that's very different than a not-for-profit company that the purpose isn't to create. It's not a business, right? It's not about making money. It's about something else. But the distinction that you made is, let's not be operating consistently in the red and having to raise funds to offset and subsidize our operations. Um, and I think those things are just very different from one another. And I think we confuse them and we make them out to be the same.
Yeah,
So
I
and
mean,
and then I was having a conversation over coffee, and I before I owned businesses, I didn't know the difference between capital expenses and operating expenses. Um, and and honestly, my understanding of it might still be rudimentary, but uh, what I understand now is that an operating expense is anything that um, the business or the nonprofit runs into that is an ordinary expense, right? So it's like just to do the day in and day out work, these things happen, and we have to spend money on these things, and so that's your um, the cost of labor, anything that goes to make the thing that you're making, the cost of goods. Whereas a capital expenditure is something that it's basically an asset that you spend money on that is going to be utilized over a long period of time, um, in order to make more money. um, or in order to help the functionality of the mission of the organization, I guess. So like the Blackfriars Playhouse would be a perfect example of that, right? That's a capital expenditure. It's a big hit that you took when you did the one-time expense, but then you're going to use that to um, make money over the course of years and years. And so I have this theory that a new kind of theater would only operate on its operating income. So you would balance the operating income and the operating expenses so that operations are fine. You would still collect donations, but you would only use donations for capital investments. Are you following that?
Yeah, I, I do. I think the line is a little fuzzier in that maintenance of that building has to be part of the operating costs.
Yes.
You know,
And the
that
debt
you have
service.
to, well, but I'm thinking you have to count on, you're going to have to replace the air conditioning. Uh, 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 you're going to have breakdowns that you can't predict.
Right.
And you've got to budget a certain amount so that when something goes wrong with the physical plant, um, you've got budgeted funds to take care of that, you know,
Hmm.
and so that's where it's harder to decide, well, how much do we
Right.
need in this year's operating budget, how much do we need for building maintenance that we can't quite predict.
Hmm.
But yeah, the other thing that doesn't happen in most theaters on that budgeting level is uh, the thing that ended up saving the American Shakespeare Center from year after year of budgeting in ways that we hope we will sell this many more tickets. We hope that we will raise this many more dollars in donation. My God, every year we were guessing wrong, and I had to cut a budget in the middle of a fiscal year because we weren't
Hmm.
gonna make it. The idea of running a 3-year average, that you're basing your next year's budget on a rolling 3-year average of the income that you got the past 3 years, and
Yeah.
that to budget expenses on projected growth is a norm in the theater industry that, in my opinion, is effing stupid. And
Right. Yeah.
I had to learn that because I did it over and over again. I had smart money people on my board saying this is the way you should budget, and it being wrong time after time after time.
Mhm.
So I think in general I agree with what you said. Um, uh,
Well, it goes into, I mean, it goes into what you said of like theaters need to operate in the black because that's the wiggle room, right? And if you operate in the black for 5 years and then you spend that, obviously nobody's taking that margin home. So it's staying within the organization. Then that becomes your safety net for these unexpected expenses or the turbulence, the natural up and down of we're not selling as many tickets this year because of something like, hopefully nothing like COVID again, but there's some outside force that is impacting our operations. We weather that storm and get to the other side and continue when things are back to normal. Um,
yeah,
but when
but
when your margins are razor thin and you're spending all the money that you bring in every single year and having a quote unquote balanced budget, then when something unexpected comes up, you're in real trouble, right?
yeah, and uh, the business terminology that that I was always faced with is we are undercapitalized. We
Hmm.
have zero cash reserves. We've got, you know, whatever it is we made over the budget isn't very much. And again, 3-year rolling average, we're putting that into the operating budget for the coming years. it doesn't grow unless you make a concerted effort. It's a little bit like a savings account for folks that on a regular basis. That if you don't put aside some of your regular money for those rainy day funds, then you're not going to have it.
Right.
And as a theater, how do you generate that money? Because we're barely making it as we are. Oh my God, we actually made a little bit more money this year as we put that into the rolling average. Well, finally, we can give a tiny raise to the actors who are already not making a living wage. It
Right.
becomes a you're really wishful thinking there, dude. And and my response is yes. And the old model of people doing this because they're young and hungry and can get by on tiny expenses, that can only take you so far. And that model blown up is what the theater industry has been built on, and I think it's got to change. And unfortunately, that also means if you're a small theater that either like you were talking about, doesn't charge for tickets, then you're talking about sponsorships and other ways of raising money, or you do sell tickets, but it's a relatively small house. The models for success are really darn tricky, and they are
Yeah.
trickier today than they've ever been. But I also think that we've adjusted our thinking in so many ways. We don't say the show must go on and that person with a 105-degree temperature has to perform tonight because there is no understudy. And if we don't do that performance, then we're going to be out X number of dollars. That thinking has changed. We're not doing
Yeah.
that anymore for the most part. Um, eh, where else does our thinking have to change that we don't have the money to make it happen? How do we do it? And in a lot of cases, I think theaters that used to be in business can no longer be in business because they cannot sustain that old model.
Right. So do you think the people who are being successful in theater today, that I mean, are there endowments, like massive endowments that like basically generational wealth that's providing that stability? Why does it seem like some theaters have, just tons and tons of cash and then the majority are struggling to make ends meet?
What's really interesting as you ask that question, I think the theater world mirrors the rest of the United States right now, where there are the haves and the have nots. And the haves have more and more and more, and the have
Yeah.
nots are getting less and less and less. So if you are big enough that and have been around long enough to have started an endowment and 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 have put enough money in that endowment that it's generating significant dollars, then you're one of the big boys and girls and siblings. Um, and what we found during the economic downturn of 2008 is that the two groups that survived were the big ones and the smallest ones because they were nimble in ways that the middle ones were not. The smallest ones survived because, well, they weren't paying people. It was, almost largely volunteer anyway. So it's not like
Hmm.
it that going down changed their finances. And the bigger ones were able to survive because they could get smaller and still survive. I think the similar thing has happened post pandemic, where where I mean, the money that saved some theaters from the government, it saved a bunch of people from the bottom to the middle to the top. But the people that have had audiences come back from the pandemic, that is back to The biggest people had enough folks coming back, and the smallest folks had folks coming back. The middle folks struggle the most because they didn't have enough people come back. So can they be
Hmm.
small enough for the audience that is coming back and the donors that are coming back? My big hope post pandemic was that we would rethink how we did things. And in most cases, the rethinking that got done was simply, how do we survive in this smaller budget area to build back up to where we were before? And the
Right.
systems are all still in place and are all the same. There wasn't any radical rethinking, other than in some places we've got, more new plays being developed, more diverse voices being heard. um but those two things didn't necessarily add up to more money to allow these organizations to survive. In a few cases they have, but by and large, this rethinking of how do we make our money, how do we use education to help make money? How do we change that base dynamic that the nonprofit, not for profit American theater has been built on since the 50s? Um, Most places didn't rethink it. And they're struggling in ways that are even deeper than the economic downturn. I don't know if I answered the question. That's it's just there's a lot of bad news out there, I think,
Yeah.
in part because we're back to the same thing of how can theater run as a business?
Hmm.
And I think more theater has to run well as a business. And from that, how do you earn enough money to pay for the things that drive your mission?
Yeah.
And if a big part of that is through grants and through donors, and you're able to make that year after year after year after year, I guess you're going to keep doing that. I just think that we've seen such huge fluctuations, and that money is not reliable like it
Hmm.
used to be. And government grants, for example, some people are still getting them and are still making a big part of their annual budgets through that. But that's the exception. Those
Right.
those grant funds have gotten less and less and less and less. And that's
Yeah.
without getting
So I
very
guess,
that's without getting very political about the federal level of grant cutting.
yeah, and that's where if we rely on income sources that fluctuate, that seems like a bad proposition. Let's say things change, and in the new administration that comes in, they decide we're going to start funding the arts again, and now there's a flood of money that goes into the arts. But if we start using all those funds like they're going to be there year in, year out, and build systems that rely on them, then won't we be in the same exact space when the administration changes and they cut them again?
Yes, and I believe that's absolutely true. A- And we've been doing that for decade after decade after decade after decade, and somehow doing that survival thing in some way. Some people are able to survive with that turn, but other folks don't. Again, it's about what is a sustainable model for you and your theater in your community, and what is available to you.
Hmm.
And it's going to be a different answer for different people in different places. and
Right.
and in some places, theaters have enough support that they can continue with that old model. I just don't
Yeah.
think it's as industry wide as it used to be. I feel like
Right.
that gap between the haves and the have nots has grown bigger and bigger and bigger. And so there will still be Broadway houses that are selling $250 seats, that are not and those aren't even the markups. That's their budget. This seat is $250. They're still going to sell those tickets. And that community theater that runs on donations only and pays people a tiny stipend for each performance, if they're in the right community where that community supports that, then they're going to be okay too. I just don't see how industry wide we can model ourselves on the Broadway houses or the community theater houses and have sustainable paying jobs in theater for folks in this environment without a lot of rethinking. How do we make our money? How do we spend our money?
Yeah. And then, I mean, does the union, the actors union, does that just complicate things? Um,
Uh, Benjamin, you are a member of the Actors Union,
I am.
and you have experienced the good things that come from that union. And I imagine that you have experienced more of the upside of that union than you have the downside, or else if it was more downside, you wouldn't be a part of it.
Yeah.
Right, wrong? What's your assessment of the Actors Union?
It's so tricky. The union has been very limiting, um, because there are a lot of jobs that just immediately become not they're not viable. I can't do them because it's non-union work, and I'm required to take a union contract because I'm a part of this union. Of the roles that are out there that I could play, it's like I would say 90% of them are off the table, especially in the market that I'm in. There's just not enough union work.
Okay,
But
off the
there
table
is
because there's just not enough. There's not enough opportunity.
the theaters don't have the money to hire union actors and union
Right,
contracts. It's too expensive.
right.
But for me, there's still a standard of professionalism, and a personal accomplishment that I feel good about being that caliber of both an actor and someone who has decided, like, I take this seriously enough that I want certain standards to be kept, which is, I think, why I'm still in the union. Is, you know, there is an equity minimum amount of pay for me to work, and that's not set by me. It's set you know, by the union and through the contracts and the negotiations that happen there. And that standard to me is the reason I'm probably still in it. Um, but I do think that both theaters and the union feels like the world is changing around them and they're not changing with it.
Yeah. You are aware, are you not? I assume you are aware that the last role you took as a non-equity actor and the first role you took as an equity actor, your acting ability did not all of a sudden shoot way up because you were a member of the union.
No, of course not. And I've seen union actors who I think are not very good, and I've seen many non-union actors who I think are excellent.
Yeah.
So it certainly
At
isn't like,
some point in the history of the evolution, it might have been true that being a part of the union was something that was a showcase or a demarcation. You reached a certain level of competence in your art, in your ability, that you hit the level that is equity. And
yes,
and that non-equity folks were striving to get good enough to be equity.
yeah,
And that just so ain't true. And
no,
hasn't
well
been true for my lifetime in the theater.
they made it a lot easier to join the union, which flooded the union with people who hadn't built up the professional accolades that used to be required to enter. And so it was always true that getting into the union did not make you a better actor or mean that you were a great actor. um, it was more about you have received some sort of professional accomplishment that allowed you the opportunity to join. And when they took that away, now you basically don't. There is no kind of. You don't have to work at all to get into the union. You just have to pay your dues, from what I understand.
I think that the word accomplishment is a little tricky because at one point there was a point system. that if you
Hmm.
worked for an equity company long enough, you accumulated points.
Yes.
But again, is that an accomplishment? It means that you did get work. It doesn't necessarily mean you were better than somebody else. It just meant that
No, well,
you got hired.
what it means is that you got hired by a company that was hiring other union contracts. And
Correct.
so they deemed you good enough to be on stage with union actors. And so there was a barrier to entry, which meant you had to be good enough to be cast in those circles.
Yeah, I'm not
or,
sure that.
or
I mean, you have to be cast in those circles.
you have to be cast in those circles. What
You have to be right
you're
enough. You have to be the right person at the right time, looking the right
yeah,
way, being the right color. I mean, it's
yeah,
again, it's not a merit based union.
true. Not at all.
Here's the bigger issue, in my opinion, that is part of where we are today, that is creating the problem for theaters and actors. The actors union dues, and what the money goes to, that the actor pays and that the theater pays. It's not just about the take home pay that you make. It's also about the healthcare component and the retirement program.
Right.
Uh, and I'm open to be challenged on this bold statement I'm going to make. Um, but the last time that I read about it, the number of actors who actually collect a dime of that retirement money is teeny, teeny, teeny weeny. It's a Ponzi scheme to provide health care. And if theaters were hiring actors on a full time basis and providing health insurance through their theater company rather than through that union, it would change the price tag on a union actor
Hmm.
incredibly. That
Hmm.
there is a huge amount of money that a theater has to pay the union to get that equity actor, that equity actor doesn't see.
Yeah.
Uh, I I know that what I'm about to say sounds incredibly Pollyanna, but I envision a theater world where two actors get the same take home pay, whether they're in the union or not in the union. And those two actors also both get health care. One is provided by the union and the other is provided by the theater. That you get to choose if you want to be in the union because it's better for you and the kind of work that you want to get. That an equity contract is the stuff that you want, but that to make a living wage, to have good conditions, to have health care is not a matter of whether you're union or not. And to me,
Right.
that's I was able to do that in my old role with my old company on a limited level. That I was able to offer X number of equity contracts and X, and I kept every year trying to increase the non-equity take-home pay to get to that point where there was equality with that. I didn't get that far, and I left before that happened. But I was also doing things that most theaters weren't doing. I was employing people year round, a good number of people year round. I was providing, by the time I left, 40-hour work weeks, 5 days a week work weeks. I was providing paid vacation. I was trying to create a less of a difference between the staff and the actors. That right now, those two things in modern theater are, it's an us and them. They are two different animals. And the performers and the technicians and the costumers, they're all gig workers, but everybody in the office is a full-time worker. And I think that that difference that has been part of the backbone that has led to the survival of theaters has to go away. And if you
Hmm.
can't do that, then I want to say maybe you should not be in business. That if you're paying a marketing person for a 5 day a week, 40 hour a week with benefits and with paid vacation and sick days, and you're not doing that for your actors, that feels wrong to me.
Yeah.
And and
Yeah, I
and I and
agree.
I
And
did it. I did it. And I was railing against that. And I tried to create a system that was more equitable. So in the theater colossus that I'm trying to build right now, it's trying to create that equity from the beginning. That
well,
part of
and
the
that's one of the
problem is shifting.
limitations. One of the limitations that I dislike about it is that it pigeonholes actors into only doing one thing. You know, on this last contract that I worked, we could not move scenery if it wasn't a scene that we were directly involved in. So, I mean, that's a union rule. And, you know, these rules, they exist to protect actors, and I can appreciate that. Uh, but but at the same time, if we're imagining a new system where the actors are a part of the administration, and it's about a group of artists who can earn a living wage, which is just not really happening to my best understanding. I mean, I'll talk to the success stories, people who are working, you know, year round at great theaters and earning an income of less than 50K on their tax returns because there's breaks between gigs and you know, and now their housing is provided for. So we could maybe factor, you know, a couple grand a month in for that.
Which is
By and
significant.
large,
I mean,
yeah, it
that's a
is.
significant thing.
But by and large, I don't know that I would say it makes up for the realities of the world that we're living in today from a financial standpoint. I mean, it's like the only way to be a working artist is to subsidize your income somehow, to have two jobs, one that fuels your passion and one that, you know, pays the bills. Um, and I think you and I both would like to see a world where artists could focus on creating a great product for audiences, and that could be their full-time job and and their full-time focus. And I think moving in that direction for me as a union actor, that's what I want to see happen. And if the union became a barrier to that for me, I would leave. You know what I mean? I would just
Yes,
exit.
and there, especially post pandemic, there a lot of union actors have left.
Yeah.
Um, and the union has to be rethought as well. That I believe in unions, and for anybody that's watching this, I'm as lefty as you could possibly be, and to me, unions are amazing ideas. This particular union, every one of those rules came at a time where we needed those rules, and that there was there and to me that's the history of American unions. Is people with the money that own the business is were treating people like shit, because there was nothing stopping them.
Right.
So every rule has something good that created it. Today we should be able to reevaluate that stuff. The idea that you can't move that thing unless I pay somebody to be there to move that thing for you. Maybe that's possible in a setup, or maybe that's extra money going to an extra body that you could divide that money up and pay the actors more, pay them a living wage, pay, you know, I I think that there it hasn't happened to you yet. What's happened at a lot of theaters is the rules are a barrier. The again, sinking money into a healthcare. I provided healthcare for employees and actors on the same level, meaning that whatever, however much it cost a staff member, if I was able to provide 3/4 of their healthcare, then that's what the actors got too. I had union actors buying into the company's healthcare because it was better than the union healthcare. So there's something broken just in that reporting of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and at the same time, the union, the last time I was running my company, it allowed for a 6-hour, a 6-day work week, 48 hours a week. That was the standard for the
Hmm.
people that were acting. But the people in marketing, they were 5 days a week and 40 hours. That's how can we create a system that allows things to be different and provide a living wage and
And equity,
trying to change
dare I
trying
say?
to change. Yes, I mean, and that's trouble. That's the trouble with that word, because I find that word has nothing to do with that union. Um, uh, I think it is much harder to take an existing organization and rewire it for these things, rather than what I'm trying to do, which is build a colossus from scratch, where these things are foundational from the beginning.
Yes.
And I'm hoping that I'm able to do that, in part because I'm talking about creating one of the big boys and girls and siblings, that the volume of tickets being able to be sold because of the size of the theaters and because of the year-round operation, that allows me to budget a living wage for the marketing department and the actors.
Right.
It allows for things that small theaters can't necessarily do.
Yeah. All right. I've got some rapid fire questions for you for us to close out.
Okay. Are you going to ask me what my favorite sandwich is? I hope not.
What's your favorite sandwich?
I liked Ryan Gosling's answer to that. Ice cream.
There you go. All right. One practice you'd eliminate from American theater tomorrow, if you could wave a magic wand.
Can I do that whole lump of 6 days a week, 48 hours, no vacation, and not to mention the 10 out of 12 days that are allowed too. All of that scheduling stuff that has become the norm, and unionized. Those are union people being required to work hours that are stupid. So
Hmm.
I would throw that out the window. 5 days a week,
All right.
40 hours should be the base for everyone.
One thing
Which
theater does better.
allows for this thing called work-life balance that everybody talks about. Where is it? It's not in the foundation of the union rules.
One thing theater does better than any other art form.
Engage audience imagination if they're not trying to be movies on stage.
Most overrated metric of success in the arts.
Whether or not you're a union actor or not, whether or not you're a union theater at Lord A, B, C, or D level,
And the most underrated metric of success in the arts.
having a mission that matters that you are able to meet.
Jim Warren, always a pleasure. Thanks for being here. Thanks for chatting with me. I hope we do it many, many, many more times. And I can't wait to see what you make next.